The views expressed in this podcast are those of the panelists and do not necessarily reflect the views of U.S. Money Reserve.
Welcome to America's Gold Authority podcast. I'm your host, Mike Barnes, and joining me today we have Ed Moy. He is the 38th Director of the United States Mint. Ed, it is so great to have you here.
Thanks for having me here, Mike.
And we have a great topic to talk about today. We're going to talk about Ed and his time there at the U.S. Mint. So, Ed, the first thing I want to talk about is gold, because when I think of the U.S. Mint, I think of dollar bills, $5 bills, quarters, and nickels, dimes. But gold plays a huge role changing over time, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So let me start at the very beginning. The United States Mint was created right after the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And with the Coinage Act of 1792 passing, it started the mint to unify the country's currency at the federal level. Yeah. And so the United States Mint has been making circulating coins since the very beginning of our country. Yeah. So becoming mint director is great because you're a part of history. I might be a goof, but I will always be the 38th mint director.
You're no goof. You're an expert, and we love hearing what you have to say. But how did you become the director of the United States Mint?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. It's kind of an interesting story to me because every director comes at it from a different perspective. The first one, David Rittenhouse, actually repaired some surveying equipment for George Washington and was a friend of Thomas Jefferson. And so that's how he became mint director, the very first in our country. And when you zip through every single mint director, we all have served for different reasons mm-hmm. because of the mint's different needs. Mm-hmm. How I got there was I had been at the White House for about 5 years in a really, really tough job. Loved what I did, but it was grueling. As a matter of fact, Teddy Roosevelt had a similar job. And when they asked him about it, he said it was the worst job in federal government because for every, so I did presidential appointments, which was figuring out who the president should appoint to what position, and I would make recommendations to the president. Roosevelt said, I was in charge of the civil service, and for every 100 candidates, I would select one, and that person would become an ingrate, meaning he's totally ungrateful, and I would create 99 enemies.
Oh, no.
So imagine doing that for 4,000 jobs.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
So I was ready to move on, and I indicated to the president that I was going to adopt my first daughter, and I didn't want to be a part-time dad, and I needed to leave the White House to have kind of a more normal job. And he said, I really don't want to lose you. Mm-hmm. You've been great in placing really qualified people in all these jobs that have done well. If you were to place yourself, give me a list. And so, I made out a list. I get a phone call the next day. I'm sitting at my desk, and the phone lights up POTUS, and that stands for President of the United States. Mm-hmm. And 100 times out of 100, it's the president calling. But 99 times out of that 100, it's his personal secretary calling, and she will say, Ed, he wants to talk to you about Surgeon General. It gives you 3 seconds to recalibrate your mind so you can be competent when the president calls. Yeah. So phone lights up POTUS, and I answer the phone, and I go, hey, Karen, what does the old man want? There's a pause. And on the other end of the phone, it goes, Eddie, it's the president. I go, oh, crap. I stand up at my desk, even though I was the only person in my office. I go, yes, Mr. President. And he says, I'm sitting here with John Snow, the Secretary of the Treasury. He was the Secretary of the Treasury. And we decided you're going to become the next director of the United States Mint. So I had made a pitch because the Mint had been functioning pretty well. The prior Mint director, Henrietta Holzman IV, was an expert in metal fabrication. And she really brought the efficiency up, the accident rate down. And now the Mint was trying to figure out strategy. Where do we fit in a world with electronic commerce and blah, blah, blah. And I pitched myself, I've worked with private equity as a strategist and he said, we need that there. So he said, Eddie, you're going to become the next director of the Mint. I was dumbfounded because I just gave him the list the day before. And he says, that's what you want. It's on your list. Why are you so quiet for? I said, well, Mr. President, when I said I'm starting a family and needed a job that made more money, I really thought about making my own money, not the country's money. And then he snorted and then he laughed and he said, "Okay, just don't screw it up for me because I stuck my neck out for you." So that's how I became that's how I became nominated for Mint Director. And I'm proud to say I was unanimously confirmed by the United States Senate. So I took office on September 5th, 2006, and I served almost my full 5-year term.
Tell us about your experience as the U.S. Mint Director, because what type of changes could you implement? How much power did you have?
Yeah, and that's a really good question. And in many ways, I'm like a train conductor on a track, right? Congress sets the track, and I have a little bit of control. I can determine how fast we go on the track and what stops we make on the track. But in general, I have to go down the track. And so that's what's interesting about Congress is authorized the United States Mint to basically do 3 things.
Yeah.
Number 1 is to make our country circulating coinage, and it's to make it in amounts sufficient to facilitate commerce. So that's quarters, dimes, pennies, etc. Number 2 is we are also authorized since 1986 to make our country's precious metal bullion. That started off with gold and silver coins, and that's now expanded to palladium and platinum coins. And during my tenure, we went from top 3 maker in the world to the number 1 in the world by a magnitude of 3.
Wow.
And that wasn't Ed Moy's brilliance. It was the financial crisis, but it was also the Mint's ability to capitalize on that moment and have supply sufficient enough to satisfy that demand. And then the third area that we have is with whatever leftover capacity that we have, we can make collectors or numismatic versions of any of the coins that Congress has authorized us to do.
Well, I'd like to give some of your brilliance some of the credit. But it's been, almost 20...
That'd be a surprise to my family, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure it would. But it's been, almost 20 years since you became the director of the U.S. Mint. How have things changed at the U.S. Mint between then and now?
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. And for many years, the Mint, there wasn't a lot going on other than we would change the dates on coins. And that all changed with the 50-state quarter program.
Yeah.
So now we're changing the backs of the designs of the quarters at least 5 times a year. And that has now since spurred the presidential $1 coin series and all those multiple designs. So the intensity of the work has dramatically increased through design. But also, because of the financial crisis, we have now become the premier maker of precious metal bullion in the world.
Wow.
So when I came to the Mint initially, on gold bullion sales, which we measure by how many ounces, each one weighs 1 ounce, how many ounces of gold that we sold 200,000 ounces my first year as Mint Director. When I left in 2011, because at the end of my term, we were doing 1.4 million. Wow. That's a 700% increase. Silver was a different story too. When I became Mint Director, we were selling roughly 10 million ounces of silver a year. When I left, it was 54 million ounces of silver a year. Wow. Almost a 550% increase.
Yeah, which is huge.
Yeah.
But when you give us those numbers, it shows that the perception of metals for the U.S. population has changed. Why is that?
A lot of it has to do with the crisis that we went through. There was, at the time, I lived it. I was at Treasury. I was in many of the meetings with my boss, Hank Paulson. We didn't know if the world was going to end. We didn't know if the entire global financial system was going to collapse. And when you have that type of concern, there's not very many safe harbors that you can go to, safe assets that you can have. Land, maybe, but you can't sell land for food.
Yeah.
Gold and silver became really, really popular during that time.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes the utmost sense. If I have, say, $10,000 and I'm trying to decide, well, should I buy a gold IRA, buy gold to have my IRA, or should I just buy a bunch of gold and put it in my closet?
Yeah. So like like any classic politician will tell you, I stand on both sides of the issue. My question is, why can't you have both?
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Yeah. So having one doesn't preclude having the other. And it all depends on what your financial goals are.
Yeah.
Right? So all of us come from different spots. All of us are in different places in our life. We have different family situations. And that should dictate how your investment strategy gets played out. So for me, I'm in a position where I have investments, I have savings, and I want to make sure that I have something in the future that I can rely on. I have friends that work for Bear Stearns and got a lot of stock at Bear Stearns, and the next day it was worth zero, right? And same thing with Lehman Brothers. And so not all stocks do that, but stocks are pretty volatile in that perspective. But gold, having some gold, I always know gold will be worth something.
Yeah.
And so as a result, I make sure that my portfolio is diversified enough where I look at gold as kind of like my insurance policy, right? I have good bets in stocks. I have very few bonds, but I have cash.
Yeah.
And cash gets eaten away through inflation. Stocks go up and down. We just had, because of the tariffs, some record drops in the in the markets. Gold has shot through the roof, right, to a new record high. And so I'm glad that in my portfolio it's balanced out to where when these are down, that one's up.
I know some people invest in some type of collectibles, whether it be baseball cards or dolls or record or something like that. When you do that, it could become very, very, very valuable.
Yep.
You never know. But you always have to worry about fire, damage, maybe dogs, cats, maybe the weather, something like that. You don't have to worry about that with gold, correct?
Yeah. So I've been carrying this around since we made it in 2006, which is the first time that this particular gold coin was made. And if you look, it's still around.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I love carrying it around because people will say, "Oh, so you really you think gold's a good thing?" I said, "Pull that out of my pocket, put it in their hand," and that itself sells the idea of gold.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're amazed that it's so dense and heavy for how small it is and how beautiful the color is, and so on. So,
but nothing can really damage it because that ounce of gold will stay an ounce of gold.
Yes, yeah. So the ancients figured out that gold is virtually indestructible.
Yeah.
Now you can change its shape and melt it and all this other stuff, but gold doesn't disappear.
Yeah. You see people taking that bite of that gold just to prove that it's really gold. And I guess that's true.
There was a time where gold was so valuable that people wanted to make sure they got the real thing.
Yeah.
And back then, gold is a soft metal. So when you bite into gold or silver, silver's also soft, you can actually indent it a little bit, which is why modern gold coins have a little bit of other metals in them to strengthen them.
It's amazing to me that there have been fewer U.S. Mint directors than U.S. presidents. That shows how amazing your job is and how rare.
Yeah.
Do all of you who are still around share a special bond?
It's like the fraternity of former presidents. There's just not many of us, right? And you look at our nation's history, and we're up to number 40 right now, and I'm number 38. The number of mint directors who are still alive is like less than 5.
Wow.
Right? And so when I first became mint director, I called up all my predecessors and said, I want to learn from your wisdom. Could you please set aside any partisanship you have, come into my office and tell me how to be the best mint director in the world? And I'm fortunate that I've maintained friendships with mint directors. Dave Ryder is a good friend of mine. He and his wife used to work together in the White House. Phil Deal from the other side of the aisle has become a dear friend of mine. And yes, there is kind of this special fraternity of former mint directors because there's not been many of us.
I like that camaraderie.
Yeah.
During
that special.
During your time at the U.S. Mint, do you have any special memories, recollections that you'll never forget?
Gosh, how many hours do you have?
We have all day for you.
If I were just to summarize just a few of the things, so I came into the 50 state quarter about halfway through, and I finished it.
Yeah.
And it was just amazing. My first state quarter launch was South Dakota, and being able to go to Mount Rushmore, which they have a big amphitheater at the bottom
Yeah.
of Mount Rushmore. Governor Rounds was just a wonderful host. To know that they flew a flag on the top of Mount Rushmore in my honor,
Wow.
and then afterwards gave that flag to me as a memento of being there for the quarter launch.
That's great.
And then seeing, 3,000 excited people in the stands and being able to, so I'm a conservative, but my kind of inside sin is I enjoy giving away taxpayer dollars one quarter at a time. And so I love those state quarter events because all these kids would be there with really big eyes, and I'd be able to be the first person to put that state quarter
To give them a quarter.
in their hands.
Oh, that's great.
I also, one of my other memorable things was stirring interest back in classic design of coins. For most people, that just doesn't appear on their radar. But for people who love coins, there's a very special coin, and that design is on the American Eagle Gold. That was never done the way it was supposed to, because Roosevelt had wanted to redesign of American coins to look American. He said, if you looked at any coin made before me, they all looked like we were European derivatives. And he said, it's about time we had our own American-looking coins.
Yeah.
And so he commissioned a famous artist at the time, Augustus St. Gaudens, to make it. And it was the full figure of liberty, striding forward with a lamp in her, leading the way, and an olive branch following, which meant enlightenment, or God was leading liberty, and where liberty followed, peace would come to that country. And it was just different than European leaders that had their face on the coin and symbols of power of the state on the back. Well, the Mint hated it because the Mint engraving team didn't design it. Plus, it was really hard to make.
Yeah.
So we made the best version we could. But when I became Mint director, I decided to take a look back at the original design of the coin and make it the way it was intended to be made.
Oh, that's great.
And that was probably the biggest sales that we ever had of a numismatic product.
Wow.
Or coin collector's product.
Wow.
And that made me happy. Two other minor points. One was under my tenure, the Mint broke $1 billion profit. And, so you look back and you go, that benefits the taxpayers.
Sure.
Now, some wag told me a cabinet department wastes $1 billion in the first 4 hours of every day. So don't get your head too big on that. And then in the end, I raised our Mint employees' morale from the worst in government. So out of 217 parts, when I got there, we ranked 211.
Oh, no.
When I left, we ranked 58, and that was the largest increase in morale ever in the history of any government survey.
Yeah.
Yeah. So things that I look back and say, I left it better than I found it, and had a lot of fun doing it.
Well, a great tribute to you.
Oh.
Thank you for sharing the memories, and thanks so much for your knowledge about all that you share with us.
Thanks for saying that, Mike. It was a very special time, and I would encourage any of our listeners that if the president ever asks you to become Mint director, do it.
We'll remember that just in case he asks. Well, that's all the time we have for today's episode of America's Gold Authority podcast. On behalf of all of us here in the U.S. Money Reserve studios, thank you so much for tuning in. If you have any questions or want to learn more about today's episode, call the men and women at U.S. Money Reserve at the number in the description below. They're going to be very happy to answer your questions about precious metals and the strategic role they play in achieving a secure and comfortable financial future. Once again, I'm Mike Barnes. We'll see you next time on America's Gold Authority podcast.
The markets for coins are unregulated. Prices can rise or fall and carry some risks. The company is not affiliated with the U.S. government or the U.S. Mint. Past performance of the coin or the market cannot predict future performance. All calls recorded for quality assurance. Offer void where prohibited.